Hope you all enjoyed this morning's session with the historical talks and technical talks. There were some wonderful images in all the sessions. I've already had lots of nice feedback from people that had been enjoying it. So it's been nice to see the numbers of people coming and joining as well. I was very impressed that we had up to 120 at one point this morning, which was absolutely fantastic. And considering what different time zones people were in. So this afternoon we've got a talk first by Tim Goldsmith about Vistascreen that I'll introduce in a minute, and then at 3 o'clock thereabouts we'll then have a best part of an hour of 3D shows similar to what we saw yesterday evening for everybody to look at, and then we'll be done by sort of 4 o'clock, depending if there's any spare time. We might have a bit of an open chat, but really we ought to be finished by 4, and then for those that want to come back at 6:30 UK time, we'll have a social hour with a bit of a light-hearted quiz that Tim's also been working on. He says there's 20 questions but worth 40 marks, so that should be good fun, and we'll look forward to seeing that. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tim Goldsmith, who will be familiar to many of you as sorry, just find him, bring him into the shop. There you go. I'll start again. Introduce Tim Goldsmith. Has been a member for many years and a 3D collector and 3D photographer, but a lot of you will know him as a camera dealer at many of the camera fairs around the country, and also now at Chiswick Auctions as the camera specialist working with them. And he's also a very avid Viewmaster collector, and often on Facebook on the Viewmaster groups there. But this afternoon he's going to change brands and talk about Vistascreen. There's a sort of very British answer to Viewmaster, and has a very interesting story which Tim's going to explain all about, having had the opportunity to interview the inventor and photographer of Vistascreen. So welcome, Tim. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are in the world. So I've just quickly like to say that this isn't a 3D presentation. It's a presentation about a 3D system. So you won't need to keep reaching for your 3D glasses. Although having said that, there are 1 or 2 images which will crop up, which you can either free view or maybe view with a prism view or something. But it's essentially it's a flat presentation with no bells and whistles. This is by far and away the most complicated thing I've ever done on PowerPoint, and I managed to crash it this morning. So hopefully we'll get through it without too many problems. So I am now sharing the screen. And hopefully you can see that. Yep, right. Okay. So this really all started with a chance encounter at a camera fair in North London, or over 20 years ago. I was there with a table full of my usual stuff, Viewmaster, ordinary cameras, a couple of stereo cameras, odds and ends. This guy just wandered up, picked up a Vistascreen set, looked at them and said, Vistascreen, I took all those. He put them down and wandered off again, and sort of leaving me shell-shocked really behind the table. So I just quickly nipped after him, and just to ask him what his name was. He gave me his name, Stanley Long. We'll see him later on. But I didn't really, I was so, as I say, I was so shell-shocked, I didn't even think to get his contact details. But luckily, with the help of Keith Wilson, who's another long-time member of the Stereoscopic Society, we did manage to track him down, and we interviewed him back in 2006. So this is pretty much all from the horse's mouth, I guess. So if you mention Vistascreen to really all but the most dedicated 3D enthusiast, you might get a blank look in return. Oh, and it's not gone to the next script, not gone to the next thing. Oh, there we go, sorry. Yeah, so they might not know what you're talking about with Vistascreen, but if you mention Weetabix, all of a sudden people's eyes wake up and they think, oh yes, I remember Weetabix. They gave it away with the cards in cereal packets. So here he is. So this is Stanley Long, and in 1956 he was an ambitious young man. He just finished his national service in the RAF, which ended in 1949, and that's where he learned his photographic craft. Really, he worked in central London. He worked for Studio Fleet in London. He then served as an assistant to Maurice Ambler, who was a high-profile London society and fashion photographer. He worked for a couple of other people for a few years, but he's really getting itchy feet and wanting to branch out on his own. And his chance came when two brothers, that's Jack and Jeff Spring, and they ran the Capital Paper Company in London. They approached him. They were looking to diversify into products that used paper, and they hit upon the idea of publishing art books of nude studies. In the 1950s, there was a big market for this type of book. I did mention these are the sort of photographs that you'd find in Health and Efficiency, although the person that I mentioned, Health and Efficiency, was too young to ever remember it. But I'm sure some of you UK guys will remember them. So very, very low-key, glamour photographs, not at all rude or pornographic, I guess. So they took Stanley on as the photographer, and they were so impressed with him and his work ethic that he eventually worked his way up to director. So Capital had their studios and the darkroom at 16 Soho Square, this is what it looks like today. And with the help of Wally Holman, they produced this book of tasteful nudes, and they printed it on quality art paper, so better than the sort of things you'd find on the newsstand magazines. And the girls in these books were photographed, pretty much all photographed by Stanley. And the venture proved so successful that the trio started to think about more products that were based around using paper. So in the mid-1950s, the US-based Saunders company pretty much had the 3D world sewn up with their Viewmaster system. They carved themselves quite a nice little niche market in the UK, but Viewmaster's extensive foreign subjects really only included a handful of British locations. And with overseas travel or holidays out of the reach of much of the UK population back then, most of the Viewmaster output was really of limited interest, all but the dedicated collector or those with inquiring minds that wanted to see views from around the world. So Stanley was convinced that there were several gaps in the Viewmaster market that he could exploit. So after some thought, and with absolutely no experience whatsoever in stereo photography, but obviously plenty of experience in conventional photography, he almost single-handedly invented and produced one of the most successful of all modern 3D systems, which is Vistascreen. Now, Stanley admits there was nothing original about the Vistascreen concept. It is basically, as we said, a cheap alternative to Viewmaster. And to keep the cost down, all the photographs were going to be in black and white. And it was hoped that these 3D sets would eventually replace the local concertina sets of postcards that you could buy from newsagents and gift shops around the country. So in the late 1950s, really, photography was still a fairly expensive hobby. And there was a huge market for these ready-made sets of photographs, which not only included postcards, but also you could buy sets of colour slides of many of these places. So he explained his idea to his fellow directors, and they both thought it was on a surefire winner, and they did a test set of photographs. Now, the difficult part was now to make a cheap but workable stereo viewer, but of reasonable quality. So Stanley set about designing the stereo viewer and decided it should be based on the 3D viewer that came with the Coronet 3D camera, which is this one. However, this viewer has a heavy metal base and fairly high quality glass lenses. And it was designed for viewing positive stereo pairs as well as contact prints from the Coronet 3D camera. It also had a slightly diffused rear screen. As you can see, this viewer was branded for use with other things, which was a very similar concept to Vistascreen. But copying all of these features would make the viewer way too expensive. The target price for the viewer was £0.50. That's 2 and 6, and that's the retail price. And they had to build in enough margin to be able to offer 50% discount for wholesalers. So this meant there's really not much leeway on the manufacturing costs. In fact, Stanley said that he thought that the viewers had to be produced for just 8p each. Obviously, they were mass produced, but that's still not a lot of money to play with. So it realised it would be too expensive to produce even simple glass lenses, notwithstanding the metal parts. So quotes were invited for injection moulded all plastic version. So as you can see, they succeeded because the coronet and the Vistascreen parts are pretty much interchangeable. So they tried several suppliers for the lenses, but the problem was nobody seemed to be able to produce a reasonable quality, thin, distortion-free, injection moulded plastic product for just a few pennies. And then eventually they found a company in Peckham in southeast London that really could produce the actual body of the viewer. Unfortunately, Stanley couldn't remember the name of this company, but he did remember that they employed many blind workers, which was one of the things at the time, and presumably that gave them the edge on the production costs over much of the competition. So they managed to get the body parts right, but the problem was still the lenses. So after a few first false starts, which involved lenses with poor light transmission or distortion, or even bubbles in the lenses, they came across Combined Optical Industries, who were in Slough in Berkshire. And they finally came up with a lens, with a pair of lenses that could be produced by injection moulding, and more importantly, at the right price. Stanley seems to remember that the viewers were made in batches of 50, and again, they were put together by outworkers. So this is like housewives working at home, doing things in their spare time. So the Coronet viewer, which came with the camera, at the time, Coronet also produced a limited number of stereo card sets that could be used in conjunction with their viewer. This is a sample of one of those sets. They covered a lot of the famous tourist places at the time, including Paris, Rome. They did famous statues, Canterbury. They're really difficult to find, these, but they're obviously the inspiration for the Vistascreen viewers. The Vistascreen views. Originally, the 10 cards in each of the Vistascreen sets were bound into the little red internal folders with gum. This was really for ease of production and packing. But obviously, in order to view each card, you need to remove them from the packet. And today, it's really rare to find sets that still have the cards gummed in place, because obviously this indicates that they've never actually been viewed. So the whole Vistascreen system was to use, well, I won't even tell you the colourful phrase that Stanley used, but it was a fairly basic operation. In total, he thinks almost 300 Vistascreen sets were produced, and he photographed practically all of them. Although a couple of other photographers were used occasionally for some of the UK sets, and most of the European sets were photographed by a different photographer. Now, there's several different promotional leaflets, such as this one, which came in with the packs of views, but there was never a definitive list produced by Vistascreen of all the titles that they produced. At the moment, my spreadsheet contains over 350 different sets. So when the Vistascreen viewer was still at the sampling stage, it was decided that photography should be started, and this proved to be a very big operation in order to produce enough sets to launch with a reasonable range. Jack Spring is one of the partners in Capital Studio, had many contacts in the print finishing world, So he organised the printing of the boxes and the design of the Vistascreen logo, and photography actually started in 1957. And they drew up a long list of places of interest, including caves, zoos, seaside resorts, other places of interest that mainly day trippers in the UK at that time would have visited. Also, many stately homes were just starting to open their doors to the public around this time, and Stanley thought that these would make a suitable subject for a set of 3D sets. So he therefore set out to sell the idea of 3D to the souvenir kiosks and the shop managers at these attractions. Now, in the late 1950s, not everybody took personal photographs like we do today. This was mainly due to the cost and coupled with the short supply of quality equipment so soon after World War II. Rationing had only ended a few years previously. Even the lucky few who could afford a cheap snapshot camera didn't have access to the fast emulsions or the range of films that there are today. So commercially produced photograph sets were available. And ironically, these picture postcard sets were used to select the scenes for the Vistascreen sets. So as time and money were really limited on each of his photographic trips, Stanley Long could not really afford to spend days in each location scouting around for the most photogenic or the most important scenes. So he simply arrived in the town, went to the first newsagent he could find, brought a set of these postcards and a map. And then after a few subtle inquiries from the newsagent, he would mark up on the map where these tourist hotspots were and set off to photograph the scenes that he already knew were going to be popular, which I guess is pretty inspired when you think about it. Now, occasionally, when he was out on his photography trips, unexpected opportunities presented themselves. And he occasionally stumbled across subjects for new sets. If a likely looking holiday camp or a caravan park was passed between his stops, then again, he would pop into the shop or the camp manager, and this would often result in a new set of views being produced. Now, this one, which is the Dean's Holiday Camp, he actually managed to get the title wrong, because this is actually Mallandine Holiday Camp, which is on the south coast of England, just outside Littlehampton in a little village called Rustington. And the reason I know that so well is that for about 6 or 7 years when I was a kid, we spent our family holidays at this holiday camp. So it's really interesting to see the place again. So these sets, which don't appear on any of the Vistascreen records, were given an H series designation on the packs. And it's I thought only a few of these sets were popular enough to actually be reordered, so they're increasingly difficult to find. So far, I've recorded 54 such H series sets, and the vast majority of which features camps and parks along the south coast, because that's obviously where that was prime holiday territory. There's a couple in Norfolk and Suffolk, a couple in Yorkshire and the north of England, but nobody knows just exactly how many there's going to be. That's half the fun, just trying to find these new subjects. So back in London, Jack Spring would be looking for new subjects, and often when Stanley made his daily phone call back to the office, he would have a new destination slotted into his itinerary. He was usually away from the office for no more than 5 days, during which time he was expected to shoot enough pictures for at least 10 or 12 new Vistascreen sets. Obviously, any longer away from base and the backlog of things he had to cope with would be difficult to cope with. Now, at the time Vistascreen was active, there were a few model villages and zoos around the UK, and these proved popular opportunities for sales. And by their very nature, model villages tend to be a fairly small area, and pictures could be shot of these in double quick time. Now, this is a small freestanding cardboard display, advertising display, which was produced as a point of sale. Apparently, there is another one which Stanley mentioned, which had a Vistascreen viewer actually attached to it alongside one of the 3D cards, but I've never seen or heard of anything except from what Stanley mentioned. Now, this is a really unusual thing. As you can see, it's a jigsaw puzzle which was produced to promote the Winchester Vistascreen set. Unfortunately, when it arrived, as you can see, there's a couple of pieces missing, but again, it's the only example I've ever seen of it. And again, they couldn't have produced very many of those. Now, the actual photography of each of these sets was undertaken in whatever weather condition prevailed at the time. So unlike the rival photographers producing Viewmaster sets in and around the UK, they were paid to sit around and wait for the perfect weather conditions. If you think about it, when have you ever seen rain or even overcast skies in Viewmaster sets? They've always got blue sky and white fluffy clouds. But Stanley had to shoot on regardless. The fact that he only ever used black and white film meant that inclement weather wouldn't always show up in his shots. And anything taken in dull conditions could be adjusted by manipulating the film development times. Now, due to time constraints, Stanley was very particular to only ever shoot 12 pictures, which he later edited down to 10 for each Vistascreen set. And because he was, as we said before, he was duplicating the classic shots from a particular area, he knew these were probably going to be the most popular places in that town. Sometimes it was only take him an hour or an hour and a half to shoot all the pictures for each set. 2 hours was the very most he usually allowed himself, and then it was off to the next one on his list. There were only a couple of occasions when Stanley admitted that he blew it, and the set never actually made it into production. But with only 12 shots to play with, a couple of duff shots in each set or a processing problem could have meant disaster, but he seemed to find his way around everything. Now, towards the end of Vistascreen's life, another photographer, Larry Neal, was brought in to help out because Stanley just couldn't cope with the amount of work that he was being asked to do. Larry met Stanley during his national service in the RAF and went on to be a fashion photographer in his own right. Now, the quality of the photographs that were produced had to be as good as possible to start with. By the time the finished product was produced, they were probably 4th or 5th generation copies. So with quality always at the forefront of his mind, Stanley used a 1920s Rolly Hyderscope stereo camera fitted with a plate back for almost all of his Vistascreen shots. This is the actual camera that he used, and he still had that camera with him when I interviewed him back in 2006. He used around six different plate backs so that he could change through, and these were either reloaded that evening in the bathroom of the hotel or the guest house where he was staying. He said he did occasionally use a 35mm stereo Revere camera, and a small number of sets were actually produced with that camera, but the beauty of using the Rolly was that you could pretty much just contact print the plates and then you were off and running. Also, he ran into a problem with getting 35mm film to lay flat. If anybody's ever tried to scan a strip of 35mm film, you'll know why. So Stanley had a Hillman Minx as a company car and was travelling tremendous distances. In 1 week, he remembers driving around 2,000 miles. And this was before motorways were even invented in the UK. Used to plot his route, and starting with the furthest away, would leave London sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning with 200 or 300 miles to go, would hopefully arrive at his destination by 9 o'clock, have a quick breakfast, go off, buy those postcards, ready for the next shoot. And obviously didn't have much problem in parking in those days because the world wasn't full of a million cars like it is these days. Occasionally he went further afield, and when he went to the Channel Islands, he actually managed to get himself a more luxurious car, which he remembers was a Vauxhall Victor. Now, life on the road and living out of a suitcase was hectic, and Stanley occasionally made time for some fun on his shoots. This one is actually Stanley in the banqueting room at Woburn Abbey, and the picture's taken from the other end of the table
and this, the very similar shot is used in the Vistascreen set. But seeing as he looks remarkably like a butler, I think it would have been better to actually include this picture in the set, but maybe he was just too modest for that. So for large interiors like this one of historic sets, for the historic houses sets, he used a multi-flash technique, usually with 3 flash heads to photograph the rooms. And this was a technique he refined whilst he was in the RAF. Luckily, the equipment seemed to hold out, and he never seemed to suffer too many problems with it. Now, Stanley devised his own system where a set of 10 shots from his Rolly camera would fit on a single 10 by 10 inch glass plate, from when they could easily be duplicated, and then a master negative was produced, and from that master negative, the bulk Vistascreen sets were printed. Now, this is a super rarity. This is probably the rarest thing in my collection. This is an uncut set of Vistascreen prints, which I found on eBay or many, many years ago. How it survives, I've got no idea. So when he produced the contact prints from his negatives, he used P1200 plate film to make the positive, and then that was contacted into another plate to make the negative, and then these captions were stripped in the middle. And this is when, if there was any variation in the density between frames in the same set, then a certain amount of dodging or burning in could be done. And then the master plate was sent off to the London Postcard Company, which is in Twickenham, down on the edge of southwest London, where they actually printed and cut the sets. Now, originally, this company was not particularly interested in working for Vistascreen because they thought that the quantities involved were going to be so small that it wasn't going to be worth their while. But Stanley managed to talk them into it, and eventually he says that they were pleased with the large amounts of orders that they received. The numbering and titling was handled back at the Capital Paper Company, and they used some of the original postcards as a guide to the captions that they were going to use. Now, Stanley used Ilford FP4 film plates, and he said this is because although the film was slightly slow, it tended to be less contrasted than the Kodak equivalent at the time. And this was to be a definite bonus, as the negatives would need to be, as I said, were copied several times before the reproduction was finished, and the contrast control was often a problem. A lot of the processing was done by Stanley down in the basement at Soho Square, and that's the address which is on most of their leaflets. Although he does admit to having had a darkroom assistant based there, who probably did some of the more mundane tasks as transposing the original negatives before making some of the plates. As I said, most of the bulk of Vistascreen sales were sold on site as visitor souvenirs. There were a few extra sales for other subjects, which is generated by the inclusion of these lists, which were in with every set. And sales volumes are difficult to gauge, but Stanley did remember the set that was incredibly popular was the first set they produced of London Zoo, when they ordered what he thought was several thousand sets. Okay, so now I am contractually obliged to warn you that there are some mild nude images on the way. So if you're offended by pictures of scantily clad or naked ladies, so this is very low key, they are very mild, but if this sort of thing offends you, then look away now. So it was common at the time for sales agents in various parts of the country to handle some of the local distribution, especially in Ireland and in the far north of the country. But the main distribution was through these wholesalers that were involved in Capital's glamour book output. So the Vistascreen glamour sets, which were Art Studies, Glamour Models and Miss Continental, these were a slight bone of contention with some of the agents who thought that putting these into a shop when anybody might wander in might be a problem. But the company had a ready-made market for these anyway because of their standard glamour books that they produced, and they obviously customers were even happier to see girls in 3D than they were in 2D. So here's one of the Vistascreen lists which came in with the things, and down here, if you can see right at the bottom right, you can see glamour models sets 1, 2 and 3 are listed, art studies lists sets 1, 2 and 3 are listed, but the Miss Continental ones, which were actually fully nude, don't appear to appear on any of the lists of Vistascreen that I've seen. So this is a glamour model set, and obviously you can see they're fairly tame pictures, but some of the 3D is really good. And Larry Neal, who helped photograph some of these, received an unexpected bonus when shooting some of these, because he actually married one of the models. So here's your Miss Continental, however you want to pronounce it. This is Paula, which is set number 1. You might well be able to free view this in 3D. It's quite good depth, as in all of them are. So this is another very rare set of Vistascreen. This is the Irving Theatre. Now, this was what we think is the first strip club in London in the 1950s. And obviously Stanley was down there photographing the girls. This is a bit like the windmill girls of the time, which is, if it moves, it's rude. So they were more sort of static tableaus than girls stripping. And interestingly, this is marked as set number 1. Well, not only is there no reference to set number 1, I've never seen or heard of set number 2 or anything else. If you can free view this, it is a little bit cheesy with the arms coming towards you, but I guess it's all part of the novelty of producing commercial 3D stuff. So on the commercial front, Vistascreen offered a sort of like an own brand service, if you like, to companies who wanted to use 3D to advertise their products. They even had the option of personalised viewer here with gold lettering. And although there's an unknown number of these sets are produced, but it's a surprising number of these that come to light from time to time. This one I found in my own collection when I was putting this talk together a couple of weeks ago, which I hadn't even noticed was branded for the London Cooperative Society. So we have no idea what the pictures were or why they gave it away. Obviously it wasn't a product for sale because it was with compliments. Maybe it was an anniversary of the co-op or something, and so that's still a work in progress. Well, this is the ultimate of customizing. This is the talk of the town, Hippodrome Corner, which is Leicester Square in the centre of London. So not only did they have their own set of 3D views, they had their own branded viewer, and even the box was customised as for talk of the town. Again, really unusual to find this as a complete set. This popped up on eBay a couple of weeks ago, so whoever it was, I stole your image, thank you very much, sorry. Chester Zoo obviously had their own branded viewer. Now, this one drove me bonkers about a month or so ago. This popped up on eBay, and as you can see, it's the 300th year anniversary of George Heriot's School, which is in Hertfordshire. So not only did this have its own branded viewer, but it had pictures inside the school and a very smartly branded outer packet. Unfortunately, this one, which was for sale on eBay, didn't have any pictures of the views that are inside. And I put on such a hugely bonkers bid on it that I thought it doesn't matter because when I win it, I'll be able to scan the pictures myself. Sadly, I didn't win it, so that's another one to look out for. Now, there's quite a lot of crossover subjects in the Vistascreen world. This one is the Vistascreen set on football, and although it doesn't specifically mention the club, I think it's Manchester, is it Arsenal? Can't remember now. But it's the only 3D picture of Jimmy Greaves, famous footballer here. And this is where it starts, where some of these sets start to get slightly expensive. This is the London Airport set. So not only does this appeal to Vistascreen viewers or people that like 3D views in general, but also people that are interested in aviation. And these are particularly wonderful because these show you some of the behind the scenes pictures actually inside the control tower at London Airport in the 1950s. This is another fairly uncommon set called the Cinema. Now, one of the ideas they had, which they were convinced was going to be lucrative, was to produce 3D sets of feature films of the period. And these were to be photographed as the film was in production and then launched when the film was finally on release. Viewmaster used to do exactly the same thing, and some of the promotional reels for Viewmaster films in 3D are getting very collectible now. Sadly, this is the only one that was actually produced. As you can see, it's called the Cinema. Sorry about these scans. These are mine from years ago. So the film was in production in 1958. It was called No Time to Die. It was produced by Warwick Films and starred Anthony Newley and Victor Mature. I think this is Anthony Newley on the chair here, very big in his day. And Vistascreen got permission to shoot these on the set from Ewan Lloyd and Jess Yates. And if the name Jess Yates is familiar to gentlemen of a certain age in the UK, he later went on to produce religious TV programmes. And he was part of the Warwick PR team at the time. TV set, this is one of my favourite sets. This was behind the scenes set at ATV Studios in Elstree, which is where they still make films and things today. Star Wars, a lot of that was filmed there. I used to work literally round the corner from them. And this is a set called Television. And again, difficult to find because anyone who's interested in the history of TV love this set because it's all going on behind the scenes. And I had to include this one just for people that are completely against 3D pictures coming out of the window, because if you can free view this, or if you've got a viewer to hand, you'll see that the lenses on the TV's camera there really stick out. It's a really great picture. So there's a few famous people which were in some of these Vistascreen sets. Maybe they weren't so famous at the time. Jane Judi Dench, now very famous actress. There she is. This is the only known 3D picture of her. This is one for the teenagers. This is the Crazy Gang in 3D. There's one of my favourite Crazy Gang members down here, Monsieur Eddie Gray. I'm amazed that these guys were still around in the at this time. These were sort of like the 1930s equivalent of Monty Python, and they were really popular in the time. Or you can even have the world's only 3D photograph of Tommy Cooper. I'm sure I should recognise some of those people in the background as well, but can't quite put my finger on them. Again, bit of a crossover again here. So people that are interested in ocean liners, these are really good sets. And again, the 3D on these is pretty good, even with a standard Vistascreen viewer. They've got some really good depth to them. Okay, the French Connection. Now, a couple of years ago, this popped up on eBay, and because obviously I've got an eBay search that says Vistascreen. When I first saw it, I thought, well, this can't possibly be Vistascreen, but obviously it's got the Vistascreen logo-ish down in the bottom left. So the guy had a couple of them, so I had to buy that one. Came from France, and then blow me, a couple of months later, a whole collection of Vistascreen French viewers cropped up, which includes the box and a really nice viewer, a really nice instruction leaflet there in France promoting the system. Interestingly, on the back, they've called themselves Capital Productions. So this must have been part of the Capital company, although can't find any trace of Capital Productions at all. They've obviously got a French address there in Paris. Maybe it was just a marketing arm, whether they were producing them. Again, it's one of those things that we're still not quite sure of. Interestingly, the French viewer doesn't have the Made in England logo. So this is like an enhanced close-up of the official Vistascreen viewer down the bottom and the French Vistascreen viewer at the top, where obviously they've adjusted the tooling somewhere, and so it doesn't say Made in England. So we're getting towards the beginning of the end now. Stanley was really raking in the money during this period. He was on a director's salary of around £17 a week, which in 1956 was a pretty respectable amount of money. He was also on a share of the profits. Now, this later profit sharing scheme proved to be the downfall of the company, because Stanley finally left the company after a big disagreement on how the actual profits figure was finally arrived at. So with no photographers producing new sets, and Stanley having produced well over 20, he left in 1959, and the whole system started to go into decline. And then came Weetabix. So Weetabix was sold off to, the Vistascreen concept was sold off to Weetabix, and they continued with a very similar viewer, although it was branded in red with a nice gold logo on the back. Their Vistascreen set, their Weetabix sets were actually given away one at a time in packets of Weetabix cereal. And if anybody's ever tried to collect a complete set of anything, you'll know that you end up with 3 number 5s and 6 number 10s and no number 4, and it's a real nightmare to make a complete set. That's why quite often you see individual cards for sale on the internet for maybe £3 or £4 a time, because people just want to complete their sets. So the viewers were sold by Weetabix, must have been at a subsidised price, because Vistascreen was selling the viewers at 2 and 6 each, but you could get your Weetabix viewer by just sending off 1 and 6. Obviously, once you got the viewer, they just wanted you to carry on buying the cereal to get more and more sets. Amazingly, they literally posted them like this. So they put the viewer in the box, they typed your name and address on the outside, they stick it in the post, and I think this is probably the reason why so many of these later Weetabix viewers have broken hinges, because they've suffered the sins of the British postal system. But it's just amazing any of them survive. So they produced quite a few sets, animals, pets, thrill sets, working dogs, the famous bird set. So after I interviewed Stanley, I was wondering whether there was anybody at Weetabix that knew the history. So I was in contact with one of the directors at the Weetabix company to find out first of all, who took the photographs, which they had no idea of, or if they, by any chance, still had the archive, which sadly they didn't. So it was a blind alley, but they seemed to make good use of the cards, because some of them occasionally crop up in different sets. So here's your famous bird sets, which were one of the ones that seem to crop up all the time, and you could send off for a special book which went alongside these. So this isn't a book to put your stereo cards in. It was like a bird spotter's guide to British birds. So up till then, we still had no idea who took these pictures. until I happened to mention this to Andrew Hurst, who we all know, and he said, I'm pretty sure we've got something in the Stereoscopic Society archive which mentions who took these pictures. And lo and behold, it was our own Pat Whitehouse. And as you can see in the highlighted clip here from the Cambridge Daily News in 1962, that it is now official that she did take the 25 pictures of the birds for that bird set. So not only did we find who took them, but we know the cameras that she used to actually take the Vistascreen pictures. So thanks to Susan Pinsky for letting me steal these off of her splendid website. You might well be able to free view these. So these are the cameras that that Mary adapted so that she could use them for close-up stereo photography. Sadly, we know who took them, we know the camera that was used, but we don't know where the cameras are now, if they're anywhere. I guess these have probably been consigned to a landfill somewhere, because anybody who came across them wouldn't think they were anything special. So there you are. Sorry, I called her Mary. I mean Pat Whitehouse. So Pat Whitehouse is well known, and she also produced this Vistascreen set, which includes some of her famous pictures of the birds as well. I think this is still available either from the Society or it pops up now and again on eBay. Okay, so we're nearly there, guys. So there's other things out there which look like Vistascreen but aren't actually Vistascreen. So these are the True to Life series, which are from Australia, and these were given away in Weetabix cereal packs. Now, why they're called Weetabix in Australia and Weetabix in the UK, I don't know. It's obviously exactly the same viewer, although the cards are all different. Actually, the quality of the cards is much better than the vast majority of the Weetabix cards. But it's almost impossible to find complete sets of these. So I don't know how long they ran for, but as you can see, 32 in this series. And there's some really nice looking cards. And that's the Stereoscope viewer, which I do have in my own collection, but it's packed away. So again, apologies for stealing this image off the internet. Lipton's tea, again from down under. These are using a very similar viewer to the Coronet viewer, although it's also looks very much like the Vistascreen one. And this is a really nice set. The 3D is very good. The contrast of the pictures is really good. But the bit that really amuses me is that they're happy to give away 3D cards in every pack of Lipton tea, except where state laws are contravened. So why it would be against the laws to give away something like that in a cereal pack, I have no idea. Maybe some of our Australian members might be able to clue me in. So there's the Lipton tea viewer. As you can see, it's like a cross between Vistascreen and the Coronet viewer. Nicely branded. This is a horrible thing. This is a Hong Kong copy of a Vistascreen. It's just called 3D picture viewer. The pictures are cartoons, really, not actual photographs. Very basic, but again, if you want a complete collection of everything Vistascreen, I guess you need to have one of these. And this popped up on eBay the other day. So I call this the Franken viewer. So obviously the Australian Stereoscope viewers have got the same problem with the hinges as the Vistascreen ones. So somebody's cannibalized the Vistascreen front with the Australian back. So I've called this almost final section orphan cards. So again, whilst going through my own collection to find to put things together for this talk, I came across these, which I didn't even know I had. They came in a collection of Vistascreen. as you can see, it's not quite the right Vistascreen format of the images, although the cards are the same size. The quality's pretty good. They look like they're hand cut, and it's got the Vista Photo Services limited address at the top. Can't find anything about this company at all, although if you can free view or you've got a viewer handy, the 3D is pretty good on these. I'm guessing this is London Zoo. I'm sure the building in the background looks familiar. Now, this is a real weirdity. Again, I found this, didn't even know I had it. It looked like it was in a whole collection of ordinary Vistascreens. When I turn them over, it's marked on the back Super Sword Edge. So this is Wilkinson's sword, the famous manufacturers in the UK of razor blades. And it's why they've overprinted this. Maybe they gave it away as a promotional thing. There's a very extensive website, everything to do with Wilkinson sword, and there's no mention at all of these on there. So again, this is one still looking for further information on. So as we've seen, so that's pretty much the end of Vistascreen. Stanley's been and gone. It's the end of Weetabix. It's the end of the clones. But I just thought we'd briefly go into Stanley Long, what happened after he left Vistascreen. He went on to work in the movie industry as a certainly as a cine photographer to start off with, and then worked his way to working behind the scenes. And in the 1960s, he helped to develop Circularama, which was a 360-degree cinema in Leicester Square. Now, any gentleman of a certain age that visited central London when they were kids might remember, like I do, going to the News Theatre in Leicester Square, which showed pretty much continuous cartoons all through the day. When my auntie used to take my brother and I into London for our yearly trip, we'd always end up in the News Theatre. But before it was the News Theatre, it was London's first 360-degree cinema. And when it opened, the only film that it had was a very badly produced Russian travelogue. The quality was pretty appalling. Again, there's a lot more research to do on Circularama, but somehow Stanley Long worked out that if he got 11 Bolex cine cameras, strapped them together into a big circle like this, put them on top of a boat, as you see here, or on the top of a car where he drove around London, he could film everything in 360 degrees. Now, he actually ended up, all these things were shot at the weekend. He couldn't afford at this time to actually hire 11 cameras. So the guys at Samuelson's, who were the hire company, used to give him, if they weren't being used at the weekends, they'd let him have these cameras as long as he brought them back in time for them to go out again on Monday morning. So after the Circularama thing, that died a death, and he went on to production, and he worked his way again through, and he ended up as a film producer, and he produced over 30 feature films, including the Adventures series. So this is Adventures of a Taxi Driver, Adventures of a Plumber's Mate, Adventures of a Private Eye. So these are, I think we used to call these like sexploitation films in the 70s. So they were very low key, sort of maybe one step up from a carry-on film, I guess you could call these. When we were interviewing Stanley back in 2006, whenever it was, he had just sold the rights to these 3 films to Channel 4 television for a one-off viewing, so they could show them just once, not like rolling 24 hours, 250 TV channels like we've got today. And he got £125,000 for letting them show those once. And he was obviously doing very well. He was living in a very nice house in Iver in Buckinghamshire. He had the biggest underground aquarium stroke fish pond that you've ever seen. And when I asked him if his neighbours, he showed me, they dug the fish pond out with 2 JCBs. And when I said, didn't your neighbours mind you doing all this work? He said, oh no, he said, the neighbours are very good. And it turned out that his next door neighbour was actually John Mills. So those are the sort of circles that he moved in. So there you go. That is probably a bit longer than I expected, but that is the story of Vistascreen and the story of Stanley Long. A real character. I'm sure there was loads more that he could have told us. He was very generous with his time, a real character. And due to the times that he was in, I doubt we'll ever see the like of him again. So there you go. I shall now stop sharing. Okay, so now I'm going to see if everybody's still awake.
That's great.
Phew.
So, there you go. Get the right one. These little pictures keep moving around. Thank you very much, Tim. That was fascinating. It was a wonderful talk.
I hope it wasn't too long-winded.
I enjoyed it very much, and I saw you only do it a couple of weeks ago and enjoyed it all the more second time round. So yeah, it was excellent. There's loads of nice comments been going in the chat. There was one part of the story which I could have perhaps put you on a clue about Pat Whitehouse's cameras. We've actually got Anne, Pat's daughter, in the audience, and as far as we're aware, the family do still have them somewhere.
Oh, right. I did see that she was in the audience. I did meet her briefly once at a convention when I was with David Berder. So I did swap messages with her earlier to say that there would be a little feature of her mum in this one, and she may or may not prop up in the quiz later.
Right. Very good. There was a question early on. Mike Hilliard was picking up on whether the Mike can unmute himself and ask a question if you like. Well, I was trying to work out what the question.
Yeah, I was just interested to know whether the camera, the Vistascreen camera, was a 45 by 107 or a 6 by 13.
Can't remember. I know where the camera is. I know who's got it, and I'm the next person in the queue if he ever wants to sell it. But I can't remember exactly what the format was.
Well, I've got a very similar Vistascreen, not with a roll film back, but that one looked like a 6 by 13 to me. However, you did mention that it was he used contact printing to get the images. That would seem to indicate 45 by 107, but
I'm not quite sure how he managed to get 10 by 10 photographic plates, because it's not a standard size. You know, if it is, but they won't all fit on a 10 by 8 plate. So unless he was getting a larger format and cutting them down, but obviously he was doing a lot of this from memory.
It seems quite possible then it was the smaller version.
I need to apologise for calling Pat Whitehouse Mary Whitehouse. That's obviously because I've got scantily clad ladies in the back of my mind.
I didn't actually pick up on you doing that. So, we've got some questions. Ian Ferns in America, who's another huge collector of Vistascreen, and been excited to come and hear Tim talking today. So I'll let Ian unmute himself, and I think there's going to be a little bit of banter as to who won the card set the other day, as well as a few other things. I could see Ian falling off his chair when you showed them.
Boo, boo.
I hate to say it, but I'd just gotten a bit of a windfall, and my bid was absurd on that set.
Well, I thought mine was obscene, but obviously yours was slightly more.
Well, the seller, I mean, honestly, probably deserves the money. It's
Yeah.
I've never seen the like of this except for the Whipsnade Zoo one that sold about 6 years ago. That was similar. So I have about 1 million questions, but I'll only burden you with a couple. First and foremost, and most importantly, where are the negatives?
He has no idea.
Oh, Okay.
Because obviously he
I've
left when he left Capital. The company was, he resigned as a director. The company was still in operation, so he left and would have left anything there that was in effect company property. Sort of pretty well washed his hands of it. I think he realised it had run its course as much as it could financially for him, so he left it there and went on to other things. So,
and what do you know about Larry Neal? Besides that he was a photographer as well, do you know which sets he produced, or do you just know that he worked on some of the later sets?
we just know he worked on some of the sets. To say we did try and quiz Stanley about it, who did this set, what was this set, and again, obviously this is like 40 years after he'd taken them, and he'd got a lot of other things in his past. So pretty much, if we knew it for sure, it was in the presentation, and I didn't go down the rabbit hole looking at all the other photographers and other names he mentioned. So.
And finally, do you have any insight as to why there are some sets available that have rounded corners as opposed to the square corners?
No, unless it was to do with the people that were printing and cutting them. So maybe if they had to change, because I would imagine they were cut out using a die, because you've got, as you saw, the uncut sheet, then there must have been a press. They would have got a stack of them. There must have been a press with a die that went down, cut everything out. Don't know. Maybe they changed.
Slide into the viewers much more nicely.
Yeah.
But only a few sets have that. Oh, and one final question: what about the sets with 11 cards instead of 10? For example,
I don't think I've made note of any of those. There is one on I'll send you a copy of my spreadsheet at some stage. And I do remember that on the spreadsheet, I have actually put 11 views, but I can only remember that being I've only recorded it on one. And I haven't gone through and counted every single image in all of my collection.
Okay. There are 11 in a special edition of Cheddar Caves, Aeroplanes, a couple others as well. Well, thank you so much. That was a wonderful talk. I actually extended my stay at this here for a day to make sure we had internet so I could see it. Bring into a new flat in a couple of hours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. I lost him. Hang on, bring him back.
Jack.
Swap round. That was great. Thanks, Tim. It's fascinating talk.
Jack's raised his hand.
Where's oh yeah, just hang on. There you go, Jack. Should be able to unmute.
Oh, right. First
Hi,
of
Jack.
all, hello, Tim. We meet again.
Yeah.
First of all, Tim, I'd like to say what an excellent presentation that was and how interesting it was.
Thank you.
I would love to see, what I'd love to see is good quality scans of like all of those cards. I know it's a lot of work, but I mean, if it's, I tried to free view some of the images, as you said, we might be able to on the presentation. I'd love to see good quality scans of the cards, just so that I could look through the history of all of them. They're fascinating. All the older the better. The old black and white ones and the later color ones would be great.
Yeah, well, when we left Stanley, we did ask him about using some of the pictures. Keith Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, who was with me when we did the interview, was particularly interested in Birmingham. So he scanned the Birmingham set, high quality, and produced a like his own set. They were bigger, they were like postcard size. He put them in a ring binder. And he did one of the Glamour Girl sets, and we sold them. I mean, he made like 10 copies of each, and we sold them for, I can't even remember, like probably 10 or 12 quid a time back then. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But at one stage, I might well do some really good scans of them and produce, say, because he did give us permission to use them. I think he was quite flattered that anybody even remembered them after all that time. And he said, I'm happy for you to do with them what you like, which is really good of him.
That'd be great. I'd love to see them. Yeah. I just want to also add, my parents are Australian, and they always said Weetabix. It really annoyed me. That's what Weetabix was called, Weetabix, and they called it the Weetabix view. And I said, no, Mum, it's not. It's the Weetabix. Anyway, fantastic presentation, Tim. I loved it.
Thank you.
I'll say thank you, Tim. Also, I have a question. Oh, and as far as what Jack said, I think scans of these would make an incredible slideshow for the society. And for the rest of us. I have a question about the camera. Using the Vidascope, you said with plates. So was he actually able to get black and white negative glass plates to use at that time? Or was he using, I think there were sheet film adapters that could replace the glass plates.
He was using plates, yeah.
He was using glass plates?
Yep.
They were available from Ilford's through to the 1950s because my father was still using them.
Ah, well, I'm amazed. I'm not sure we could have got them here in the States, but that's nice to know.
Well, bear in mind that their offices were based literally in the centre of London. They probably, and they had connections with, with not only with the photographic world, but in the printing world and in the movie world. If anything was available, they could have got it. So
great, interesting. Well, thank you. Incredible, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more for any more? Oh, Jack's back.
Come on, Jack.
Hello. On the subject
just we have run over time already. So if you're quick, go ahead.
It'll wait. On the subject of the glass plate versus cut film, Colin Clay showed me photographs he took on his honeymoon of his lovely wife, and they're on glass plates. And like has been said, I said, glass plates, surely by that time, Colin, film was available. But Colin said glass plates, with Colin Clay, we all know him, glass plates were cheaper, and he shot with black and white glass plates, even though film was around. But that's my 2 pence worth. Thank you.
Go on, Ian. One last question. Bring us
Yeah,
to
this is really an Anorak question, but do you have any copies? Because I passed on a set that had one, so I know they exist. But of the Type 1 supply list with only the first 20 sets, numbers 20 through 39 on it.
I think I probably have. I think I was going to include that in the presentation. I think I've got a scan of it somewhere. Just before I finally go, Barry Alders has just asked if you can throw any lights on the Stereoscopic 3D card. So Stereoscopes with 1930s, it's the folding metal viewer, and then you've got cards from all around the world. So Barry, yes, I can throw some light on it. This time next year, expect an even more mind-blowing presentation on Stereoscopes than this one was. He said modestly.
We'll look forward to that. I'm writing you down on the programme now as we speak. That was great. That was fascinating. And just to round off, if anybody's got a Vistascreen or likewise viewer to hand, we've got an opportunity. We could do a quick screen grab of everybody holding them up. If you don't have one, if you can turn your camera off, you'll disappear out of my screen grab then, which I'll do myself. So let's see how many we've got for me to try and do this. If we get back to gallery view. So if you have a Vistascreen viewer, hold it up. If you don't, can you turn your camera off?
Does a Vidascope count?
Yeah, it'll do. It's close enough. Or a set of cards or anything. Let it just settle down a minute. Nearly all there.
This is the Franken viewer, by the way.
Right. A couple of people settle down who are getting sorted. You have to do a couple of different screens. Okay, hold still. If you got it to the side, smile at the camera nicely. Ready, hold there. try again. There's a couple of different screenfuls. I'll have to do a Photoshop on bringing you all together. Keep there, because you've no idea whether you're on the first screen or the second. Oh, another one. Back again. Keep going. Hang on, there's still people coming in again. I'm ready. Hang on. I'm going to have a right job in Photoshop now. That is fantastic. Thank you very much. That should make a nice shot for Instagram. I'll bring myself back in. Thank you very much. So, Tim, thank you very, very much. That was absolutely fantastic. And, don't mind at all. I don't think anybody else does that. We've overrun a bit. It was absolutely fascinating talk, and well researched as well. So, real big round of applause from everybody. And thank you also. You're back on at 6:30 hosting the quiz.
Yep.
That's excellent. Thank you again for all the hard work with that. So we're going to show a few 3D shows in a minute, but then Tim's back at 6:30. We're only supposed to be running through till 4. I would imagine it's going to go till about 4:15 now, because we're just short of about 50 minutes of shows to do. So we won't be far off on the hour when we've done.
It's not as if there's anything else we have to do.
Sorry, Jack.
I was just saying, it's not as if we're busy. Well, I'm not.
It's entirely up to you whether people come or not. The talks are being recorded. You can always catch up on YouTube, and so it's entirely up to people in their own circumstances. So thank you again for Tim. What we'll now do is I've actually got Dennis Boersma in the Netherlands is going to do the sharing of the shows for me rather than me doing it from here, just to hopefully overcome a bit of technical difficulties. And the first show is the second one of the ISU code shows. So Stephen O'Neill yesterday introduced the ISU, the International Stereoscopic Union, which is sort of the worldwide body that all the different 3D clubs belong to, and we all get together every 2 years for an international congress. But every, I think it's twice a year, a digital slideshow is put together that all the different clubs contribute some images to, and it's split up into 3 different videos. You can go on YouTube and watch quite a lot of the previous versions, and we're going to see the second one once Dennis is ready. I hope you all enjoyed that. It's another wonderful show of the ISU code shows. I see Stephen's actually back from his day out, so he's the one doing all the hard work putting that together. But couldn't happen without the wonderful photos of everybody in the different clubs around the world. And I noticed a comment in the chat, which we had a similar thing yesterday. The live stream on YouTube of this meeting is literally that. It is a live stream of what you see here. So the aspect ratio is for free viewing or using stereoscopes, just the same as we're doing in the Zoom meeting. It isn't a half squeezed format for watching on a 3D TV, which is not impossible, but it is quite technically convoluted to be able to do both simultaneously. But there are a lot of past versions of the ISU code show are on the internet on the ISU channel. It's well worth going and finding the channel and subscribing to it, and then when new ones are added, you'll know about them. And same for us, if you're watching on YouTube, go hit that subscribe button. So next up, just check my list. We have a show by Frank Lorenz from Germany. He's been on a trip to Singapore, and Frank is the past president of the ISU and also the German club, the DGS, and is a very well-travelled gentleman. So it's a wonderful show that he's put together here.
Singapore is a modern city-state south of Malaysia. It is one of the richest countries in the world, offering a high quality of life but an equally high cost of living. Founded in 1819 as a trading post, Singapore was a British Crown colony until 1963. The influence of colonial times can still be felt today. Singapore sees itself as a melting pot of cultures. The main ethnic groups are Chinese, Malay and Indian. The main religions, Buddhism, Christianity and Islam. In the garden by the bay, the super trees grow. These are 25 to 50 meter high steel scaffolds overgrown with plants. A sky path allows you to take a stroll high above the city.
Thank you, Frank. It was a wonderful show. And Frank does have his own channel on YouTube, so you can actually watch that show and many of others of his on there, and they are in various formats for 3D TVs. And I think he has his own hosting of his own shows elsewhere, as well as YouTube for other quality of things. So next up, we have a show by Bob Price, who's one of our members that comes to the Coventry meetings. And he does a lot of nice close-up shows of butterflies and other insects, and absolutely fascinating close-up photography and video. This is a show called the Brown Hair Streak Story. This actually won an award in the NSA's convention last year when they did theirs online.
This is the story of the elegant and elusive brown hair-streaked butterfly and its close relationship with the hedgerow shrub blackthorn. The drifts of white hedgerow flowers of blackthorn are a herald of our spring. These small flowers go on to produce a beautiful fruit in late summer, sloes. The high-flying females of the brown hair-streaked butterfly come down in late summer and early autumn to lay their pinhead-sized sea urchin-like eggs on blackthorn bush stems at branch points and the base of spines. Next spring, once the leaves are abundant on the blackthorn, the eggs hatch to give the minute black-headed green caterpillars who will feed exclusively on the leaves of blackthorn. These highly camouflaged green caterpillars go through 3 molts, eating their shared skins at each stage to arrive at a final 4th instar mature caterpillar. Once mature, the caterpillar turns pinkish and starts to pupate, shedding a final skin. The pupa finally matures to a rich brown colour. In our hands, this stage was reached about 4 weeks from the eggs hatching. Another 4 weeks on, the butterflies emerged, at first with very shrunken wings, to be filled out by the butterfly pumping fluid into its wings' veins. Of our 7 successfully emerged butterflies, only 1 was a male. The females, with distinctive orange markings on the upper side of their forewings, predominated. All of the butterflies were successfully released at our Butterfly Conservation Warwickshire Reserve at Brighton Wood Meadows.
Thank you to Bob Price. There's marvellous photography and well-researched story of the chrysalis and butterflies. Next up, we have the Swiss Club's theme of the year on reflections. This has been supplied by Stephen O'Neill, as well as the ISU code shows. The text in this is in Swiss German, but there's only a couple of titles, so I think you'll work it out. That was wonderful, showing some amazing photos there by the Swiss Club. I think that's a wonderful idea to set a theme early on in the year, and the people of the club, when they're out and about taking photographs, if they spot something, they're more inclined to take the photograph, which they may not have otherwise thought about doing, and it makes a wonderful show. Next, we have a show from Australia. One of the Sydney Australian club members is Mark Brennan, who's quite prolific in entering the other overseas exhibitions of the PSA, and has been very successful and has been proclaimed the world's top 3D photographer this last year, along with the Sydney Club being the top club for the second year. So the first show we've got from Mark is Cow Cow Boogie.
Out on the plains or down near San
In the UK, as well as the Stereoscopic Society, there's actually also the Third Dimension Society, which by coincidence, majority of us actually belong to both clubs these days. Whereas the Stereoscopic Society have meetings in London and Coventry, and recently in Edinburgh. The Third Dimension Society traditionally was more northern based, with meetings in Stockton and now moved to Redcar, and we were in Bury near Manchester, and also sort of co-host the Coventry meetings. But each year the Third Dimension Society hold the Third Dimension Society's International Exhibition, which is a PSA recognised 3D photographic competition. And Ray McMillan, who organises the competition, has put us a little show together which shows the awards from last year, 2020, and then I think it also announces the dates for this coming year's competition.
The Third Dimension Society presents the award-winning images from our 57th International Exhibition of Stereo Colour Photography, held in September 2020. The reality section comprises traditional unprocessed colour stereo images. Mirror Font by Barry Aldous was photographed at Salisbury Cathedral and gained the Best Use of Stereo award. Fishing Rest is the work of Henry Eng. This image was credited with the Humanity Award. Neil Crick presents us with Extreme Hair, a worthy winner of the Humour Award. Lichen Spider gained the Natural History Award for Jack Musatko of Pinole, USA. Long since abandoned, gained the Landscape Award for Australia's Bob Price. In third place we have Sincere Prey by Henry Eng from Maryland, USA. Second place was awarded to Let Me Out of Here, ably captured by George Themelis of Ohio. First place went to Mark Brennan of New South Wales for this dramatic shot entitled Taralgad Rodeo 2. The altered reality section includes monochrome and post-processed stereo images. In this section, Mark Brennan gained the Best Use of Stereo award for his interpretation of Paranoia. Jack Musatko achieved the Humour Award for Dog's Dream. Third place went to Australia's Jeff Clement for this nicely portrayed image, Cormorant. Dennis Green of Michigan derived this intriguing shot entitled Wisp's Mirror to win the second place award. First place was presented to Brian Davis for this moody shot entitled Trees in the Mist. Our final section, Images in Action, comprises audiovisual and/or video entries. Mystery Cats of York was by Ray McMillan. Cow Cow Boogie was by Mark Brennan, and the winner, Welsh Highland Railway, was by Mike Hilliard.
We have all walked round the streets and alleyways in the city of York. We looked up at the Minster and many other fine buildings. But probably none of us ever noticed the watchful cats that observe us from windowsills, doorways and rooftops. How many have you spotted whilst visiting the city? Up near Lendal Bridge, opposite the museum gardens, Chambers' cat resides aloof in a stately pose, with his tail curled neatly round his paws, Chambers is named after the Chambers building on which he sits. The Golden Fleece has been a coaching inn since 1667. It is also regarded as York's most haunted pub as well. The ghostly cat is seen as an apparition coming through the white stone lintel above the window on the first floor. Finally, there are more cats that are on the prowl in York. It is your mission to find them. Good luck.
Trains on the Welsh Highland Railway are hauled by these ex-South African Railways Class NG G16 Garratt locomotives. They have 5 such locos, of which 3 are presently in service, and a 6th is being acquired. It passes through beautiful mountain countryside, including the beauty spots of Bethgelert and the Aberglaslyn Pass. The modern railway, along with the Festiniog, is the perfect way to enjoy the beautiful countryside of North Wales.
Thank you, Ray, for putting that little show together. It's nice to see all the winning entries from last year's competition. And as it said at the end, the entry forms will be on the website by June for this year's competition. I'm going to finish off this session with another show from Mark Brennan in Sydney. I did notice we still had one of the Sydney members with us, so it's very nice for him to stay up this late to join us. This is a show called Twilight to Starlight in Sydney Town. That was wonderful. Some beautiful photography. There were the night shots and reflections. I'm afraid our little Zoom presentation doesn't really do that justice. That really is a show you want to see large on a 4K TV, or even better in an auditorium surrounded by a healthy audience and a very large projection screen, and everybody can sit and enjoy it. Hopefully it won't be long and we'll be able to have the regular society meetings again and proper conventions. That rounds up this afternoon. I would like to thank again Tim for an absolutely wonderful talk on Vistascreen. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm sure we all learnt a great deal. There's certainly a lot to go away, and the prices on eBay will no doubt shoot up tonight. That's more or less it for the original programme of talks and shows. What we tried to work out was how to put an element of a bit more social interaction into the programme, whereas the audiences have been so large, we couldn't really sort of, like as normal monthly meetings, just open up the microphones for everybody to chat. So unfortunately, we've all been sort of muted apart from the odd question and answer session. So what we've come up with is at 6:30, which is just in about 2¼ hours from now, we've got a light-hearted quiz, which I mentioned Tim Goldsmith has prepared for us. It's about 20 questions, probably take about half an hour. We'll put it within an hour, social hour, so we can have a bit of a chat or laugh about the answers. And no doubt some people will want to question whether Tim's right or wrong, or just give us little anecdotes about them. I'm conscious the New York Club have their regular weekly meeting at 8 o'clock, so I don't want to sort of tread on their toes. There's quite a few of us generally go and join them. So with that, I will remind you, if anybody wants to save the chat, if you go to the bottom of the chat box, there's the 3 little dots button you can press and then save the chat. So you do that before I shut the meeting down. Otherwise, thank you very, very much for coming. Hope we've all enjoyed it. And we'll see those who want to come back in a couple of hours for a little bit of a light-hearted quiz. Otherwise, tomorrow in the afternoon, we're off on we would normally go on the excursion on a Sunday, but we've obviously can't do that. So we've prepared a couple of shows to look back at some of the past conventions and excursions. So that's 2 o'clock, I think. Yeah, trying to remember myself now. At 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, at British summertime in the UK, and then in the evening we have the premiere of our annual competition for this year, which I have actually already loaded up onto YouTube in 3D TV formats of side-by-side, half-width side-by-side and half-height over and under, and I've scheduled them to go live at the same time as the 7 o'clock meeting. So anybody who's got a 3D TV, find the Society's channel, and while we're having the Zoom meeting, you can always come into the Zoom meeting if you want just to hear what's been said and a bit of social chat afterwards. But rather than watching the side-by-side Zoom, you could watch it in all its glory on your 3D TV. So with that, I'll bid you all a good afternoon. Go off and have a bite to eat, a well-deserved drink or fresh air or whatever. Check the football scores, see whether they won or lost. We'll see you all later.
Thanks, Andrew.
No problem.